to Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, December 27th, 2023. This is the last Broadband Breakfast Live Online of the year, and very excited to welcome so many of you. Thank you for joining us on this what we're calling one of the 12 Days of Broadband. So I'll say a little bit more about that just now. But for now, I'm Drew Clark, editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. Happy to welcome all of you here with us. As is the case, we live stream these across multiple platforms, and we also record them, make them available on Broadband Breakfast. So you can watch replay if this time is not convenient for you. Know that you can come to this the page and watch it. I'll put the page in a little bit in the Zoom chat. Most people, well, many people watch through Zoom. We have lots of people on other channels on X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And thank you for the audiences on each of these channels. And as I said, this is our last one of the year. The Broadband Breakfast Live Online Wednesday at 12 noon. Next week will be a discussion with top technology, policy, and broadband journalists. In some ways, today you have me talking about the first half of the 12 Days of Broadband, and next Wednesday you'll have other journalists talking about all 12 Days of Broadband. And in fact, we do have two confirmations. Howard Buskirk, Executive Senior Editor of Communications Daily, and Ted Hearn, the publisher of Policy Band, will be with us. We have other invitations out, so hopefully we'll have several more joining us next Wednesday, the first Broadband Breakfast Live Online of the new year. Also, just looking ahead a little bit further, on the 10th, we're going to be live from Las Vegas. This Consumer Electronics Show obviously kicks off the early part of the year, and Broadband Breakfast will be there. We will have people who are attending CES 2024 and give you a report live from Las Vegas. And then the following week, the 17th, we're going to be talking about broadband in the Global South. We're going to be looking at examples of broadband deployment in South Africa, India, and Australia. And don't miss, we're gearing up for coming up quite soon. Mark your calendars for February 8th, the Broadband Measurement Summit, an in-person event in Washington, D.C. I also want to give a shout out and thanks to the sponsors of the Broadband Breakfast. We really appreciate your support. It allows us to do free programming like this every Wednesday. Our sponsors include Utopia Fiber, Broadband.money, Comcast, DCS Technologies, Nokia, BroadbandToolkit.com, Google Fiber, Broadband Now, Michael Baker International, Positron, Access, as well as the Institute for Local Self-Reliance Community Broadband Networks Initiative, the California Emerging Technology Fund, and we're very happy to welcome our latest sponsor, Wesco, and look forward to seeing more and hearing more from Wesco in the new year in 2024. Let me turn now to the 12 Days of Broadband and give a little background to that. You have opportunity to participate in this event today if you'd like. You just got a signal, send me a chat. We can move you from a attendee to a panelist if you'd like. Otherwise, it's just going to be me talking about the first 6 in our series of the 12 Days of Broadband. So let me go ahead and go to the page, the homepage for Broadband Breakfast, and share my screen so we can kind of talk together with that during much of our discussion here. So we actually did this last year for the first time. It was a series of 12 articles, the top 12 articles of the year. We decided to have a little bit of fun with it. And as you can see, we've just published the 6th article today. So here's the piece. And here's the conceit on the first day of broadband. My true love sent to me one artificial general intelligence. That was our story a week ago, and we've been doing one a day, every day except Sunday. We just published the 6th. I'm going to walk you through the other 5. but we are not going to do all 12. We got to save that for next Wednesday when we have our tech and broadband journalists, and we're going to talk about all 12. But as I was starting to say/sing, one artificial general intelligence on the second day of broadband, my true love sent to me 24 reverse preemption pole attachment states, 2023 edition. And those of you who have good memories will know that we did a piece on a similar topic last year on the issue of pole attachment, the reverse preemption being the states that allow, or I should say, the states that don't allow the FCC to set their rates. They have the power under the Communications Act to reverse preempt the FCC, and 24 of the states have done that. That still leaves a lot of attention at the FCC on pole attachments. And we did a completely fresh story because there was a lot of action on this subject. All these are fresh stories. All these are brand new. We do the, again, we've done this now 2 years in a row, and hope to continue it, tradition, if you will. And so anyway, that's the second day of broadband. On the third day of broadband, my true love sent to me $3.6 billion in funds remaining in the Affordable Connectivity Program. And this one's a new one. We did not cover this topic last year. It didn't kind of rise to that 12 story test, but it is a very significant one. And again, we'll go through these just now. I'm just giving you the lay of the land, so to speak. On the fourth day of broadband, my true love sent to me 4.8 million challenges to broadband data coverage. And this again is a repeat, but a new repeat. In other words, we did one on broadband mapping last year, but this one there was a lot of progress, right? A lot of discussion, a lot of news and information about the maps, and we'll talk just a bit about that. By the way, we are updating this page at the bottom, this 12 days of broadband, as well as the page for this event, with these 6 days, 12 days in a week's time. So we've now done the first, second, third, and fourth. On the fifth day of broadband, my true love sent to me 56 states and territorial broadband offices implementing BEAD. BEAD, of course, probably the big story of 2023, also the big story of 2022 in the broadband world. BEAD, of course, is the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Program. And today, December 27th, is actually the deadline for the NTIA to kind of officially approve. I believe, maybe we'll get a little intel and update from others in this call. But the 56 states and territories have all been busy. They've all issued their draft reports, and now it's kind of to public comment and to the NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. And then today we published the sixth day of broadband. My true love sent to me you got to cheat sometimes, $166 billion in American semiconductor investment. And this is a new one. We didn't do a piece on this topic last year, but this year the CHIPS Act was very significant. We did a whole event in June called the Made in America Summit, where we brought together infrastructure, green energy, and CHIPS Act, if you will, a kind of a whole new framework for the Biden administration and their approach to Made in America or Invest in America. I'm not going to tell you what days 7 through 12 are. You're going to have to come back next week to see and discuss, but we don't have to wait next week. Just every day, we're going to roll one a day, every day, including Saturday, but not on Sunday, for the next 6 days. And we're gonna again kind of talk about this. Go to these. That's what we're gonna tee up a little bit. For those of you who are curious about the last year, we did 12 last year, and this was kind of the list. A symmetrical gigabit network was the first day. 24 reverse preemption pole attachment states the second day. Section 230. Okay, again, you got to cheat sometimes. 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Though there was a lot of discussion and a lot of interest, it was not quite the same level of angst. So we did not do a piece on that this year. 42.5 billion in BEAD funds. Okay, that's last year's. 5 federal communications commissioners and the whole drama over that. Wi-Fi 6E last year. 7.7 inflation rate. Boy, how things have changed. We're now down, I think, around 3%. It's the latest annualized numbers that we've been seeing. So you got to give a hand to Federal Reserve and the administration for getting that down, getting that closer to control. Now, obviously, it hasn't really affected. Interest rates are still quite high. So we're in a world that's different from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but we do not have that kind of inflation rate clearly now. This was the take we had on the national broadband fabric last year. 8,132,968 census blocks in the national broadband fabric. We talked about the Universal Service Fund. I guess I was incorrect. We did have a piece on the Affordable Connectivity Program, the 10th day of broadband, that 10 billion. Okay, well, now we're down to 3 billion. So we spent 7 billion in a year on the Affordable Connectivity Program. And obviously, with it planning to run out in May, that becomes a big issue. We did a piece on China, the 11th year of Xi Jinping's rule in China. And then the 12th day was 12 or more state broadband offices. So anyway, that's a little kind of cheat sheet for those of you who want to refer to the 12 days of broadband. All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and feel free to kind of chime in with questions. The Q&A front, again, really appreciate the turnout today. I know many of you are not working or a lighter day, but we wanted to be here just because good to have this community able to come together. All right, so let's talk a little bit about these stories. I'm going to take about 5 minutes on each of these 6 stories that we've published and invite your questions on them. Once again, these 6 stories, 3 or 4 of them, no, 3 of them were repeats of last year, but repeats in the sense of the topics are repeat. The stories are new. There's new material, new content that's happened, and that's definitely been what we've done. So let's take a look at our first story here, okay? So the first day of broadband, my true love sent to me one artificial general intelligence. So obviously this was probably the biggest story I would argue of the year is the explosion of AI, of ChatGPT kind of clearly in the lead, but I actually use not just ChatGPT but Anthropic's Claude. I find it each of these 2 are different and good in different ways. I also use Bard, right? I haven't quite figured out how Gemini fits into Bard, and the Google kind of struggling to catch up in the large language models. But I mean, look, again, I welcome your thoughts on this. This is I would argue a revolutionary technology. The question is, what are its limitations, right? What does it do and not do well? Okay. And of course, the whole concept of artificial general intelligence, AGI, in some ways, that's kind of a concept that's been promoted by OpenAI. This notion that, we have to have this nonprofit entity that is looking out because of the potential dramatic impacts that it could have. I should note that all of the illustrations for this series were done by DALL-E, the image generation program of OpenAI. Took me many times to get several of these, get them to do what I wanted, right? And this is kind of the new field, if you will, is the prompt engineering, right? How you get AI to do what you want. But in the same way that word processing represented a dramatic change in the way we wrote 40 years ago, I think this is representing, I'm certain, even greater change in the way that we write and edit material, right? So this piece is I wrote this one with a little help from one of our reporters, Jericho Casper, and I focused on the Turing test, right? And the Turing test by computer scientist, British computer science, Alan Turing, most well known for his role in cracking the Enigma, or using the Enigma machine to kind of crack the German cryptography in World War II. Very, very significant role there. But to do that, he basically built a computer, one of the first computers used, and he came up with this concept of the imitation game, that it's a hypothetical test of a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior equivalent to or indistinguishable from that of a human. And we have passed the Turing test. There's no question in my mind that if we did not know we were talking with the computer, we would think it was a human, right? I mean, the kinds of interactions one has with ChatGPT or Bard or Claude or any of the others is akin to that in my opinion. And this article is really just kind of talking about how dramatic this impact has been. We highlighted the very strange news last November, what was it, 17th, when Sam Altman was fired from OpenAI for 5 days, and reinstated after a little bit of a employee revolt from the board's revolt. We don't cover AI to the depth and extent that other technology publications do, but we are living in the world of broadband and technology and information, and it's unavoidable to be aware of and see what has gone on. And in fact, we did have a Broadband Breakfast Live online event just a month ago, right? We had planned it in anticipation of the 1-year anniversary of the launch of ChatGPT on November 30th of 2022. And of course, we had a lot more to talk about because of the drama at OpenAI. In our piece here, this is the first day of broadband. We also talked about Washington and the role, the way it's waking up the Biden administration. We didn't talk quite as much about all of the working group sessions that the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's doing. They've been kind of off the record background, so it's been a little less sort of substantive. Well, I don't know if it's less substantive, less transparent. How else can we say it? And so it's a little unclear where all this is going. And I kind of highlighted a piece by Raman Chowdhury, CEO of the tech accountability nonprofit Humane Intelligence, where she highlighted the different way OpenAI has defined AGI, artificial general intelligence, from originally defining it as AI systems that are generally smarter than humans. Okay, I think we're there, versus AI systems that are highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. Okay, again, they hallucinate, right? I mean, anyone who's used these know that the answers are not completely reliable or even maybe reliable full stop. So how valuable is an AI chatbot that you always have to be looking over its shoulder and making sure it's not making stuff up, right? Not making words or facts up to the chagrin of lawyers and others who have attempted to use this. So I think those who follow technology and internet and the world we're in recognize that there are things you cannot appropriately use chatbots to do. Oh, and I should say, super big news on this front today. The New York Times launched a lawsuit against OpenAI on the grounds that it was infringing on copyrights by scooping up and reading all of the material on the internet. Many times, websites like the New York Times and others make information available to bots, whereas they shield it from individuals because they want bots to read it and index it. But now, whoa, the bots have taken the information and they've spitted information back out. I haven't read the complaint of the Times yet, but according to the reporting in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, it's alleging that it's basically spitting out information. OpenAI's ChatGPT is spitting out information that is verbatim or close to verbatim New York Times. And so again, you've got a brand with a great reputation for reliability, New York Times, and does that help? Is OpenAI inappropriately leveraging that reputation by copying its work? So that's an issue we didn't even get to in this piece, but it is an example of the extensive controversies that we have not seen the last of. So that's the take on the first day of broadband, artificial general intelligence. I will be paying attention to your Q&A. It's a little easier for me to follow the Q&A than the chat. So if you've got something you'd like me to address, please pop it in there. And I'm going to, just like I said, I'm taking about 5 minutes to go through each of these 6 days. But if you want to kind of chime in, or if you'd like to raise a point, again, we'll try this. I'm not sure if, succeeded in pulling someone in from the audience, but if you're on Zoom, you can do that. If you're on the other audiences, like I can't pull you through another platform, but I can pull you through Zoom and put you live if you're interested in commenting. All right, let's go to second day of broadband. Second day of broadband is 24 reverse preemption pole attachment states. The number has not changed in the last year. There were 24 in 2022. There were 24 in 2023. So we're not really highlighting the change, but what we are highlighting in this story by reporter Jake Neenan is that Chairman Jessica Rosenworcel said the FCC's recent move was an effort to ease friction for BEAD deployments. Okay, so you're seeing BEAD. So BEAD's kind of in everything. BEAD's in pole attachments. BEAD's in affordable connectivity program. BEAD's in mapping. BEAD's in certainly BEAD's in BEAD, right? So anyway, BEAD is of course the story of the year for broadband, but pole attachment. So what did happen recently? Well, again, we cover this in our story. Again, all these stories are available for all of you to access on Broadband Breakfast. I do want to point out that particularly those of you who are regulars who come to our Broadband Breakfast Live online every week or most weeks, or who are members of the Broadband Breakfast Club, we've got a real treat for you. In the new year, we are going to be revamping our website with a lot easier interface, a lot easier access to premium content, and look forward to sharing more about that with you in the new year very, very soon. So I just want to kind of call that out. This was actually a premium feature we launched last year, the 12 Days of Broadband, and as well as these monthly reports that we've done. And those are going to still be around. But again, look forward to sharing more details about that with you in the new year. So the second day of broadband, we were talking about the pole attachment hot button issue. And the big issue is about who needs to pay for the replacement costs of pole attachments. And there's kind of a dispute between those who want to go fast and who aren't the pole owners, and those who are the pole owners and who may want to go fast, but they want, a little bit more money from the pole attachments. So here's the way the story captures it. The standing policy was to allow pole owners to allocate all replacement costs to an attacher if a replacement was necessitated solely by the need to accommodate new equipment. But telecom companies argue that they were in practice footing the bill for poles that needed replacing anyway, which utilities disputed. So, even though the FCC took comments on this back in March of 2022, it entered this year without a ruling, and there was a lot of back and forth. And just a month ago, the FCC took action on this. We covered this in a Broadband Breakfast Live online in October. This is the core of the action is the rules set up a rapid broadband assessment team, an agency group that will be responsible for quickly resolving disputes that would otherwise slow down broadband deployment. And the new rule also expanded the definition of a red tagged pole, the replacement cost of which cannot be allocated entirely to an attacher by the FCC rules. So those are some of the changes that have happened in the world of pole attachments. The deal is not done yet. This is still a notice of proposed rulemaking. People in this FCC land, broadband land, certainly no NPRM. We try to spell things out here, and so I'm telling you it's the notice, but the final rule will likely come out in early 2024, and comments are due for that proceeding in February of next year. So that's the second day of broadband. Let's go to the third day of broadband. That third day of broadband is $3.6 billion in funds remaining in the Affordable Connectivity Program. And we do have a question here. Thank you for asking the question. Let's just pull this up here. Mike Dunn asks, the third day topic, Affordable Connectivity Program, seems to be getting a lot of ink these days. With the projection exhaustion of ACP funds in 2024, where can the money come from to replenish what sounds like a mandatory aspect of BEAD applications? would it make sense to swing ACP over to the Universal Service Fund and sunset the Lifeline program? Well, Mike, you've really just, again, put your finger on the core issue in this controversy, right? There has long been a program, a plan, a fund, the Universal Service Fund, which, although it's been through multiple iterations, is basically been around since the Telecom Act of 1996. And it's effectively a kind of a cross subsidy, or that's the original idea, to cross subsidize those with lower costs to connect, using using the gains from the cheaper costs to deploy to more dense environments, to those that are less dense. That's the idea behind the Universal Service Fund. There were multiple pockets of funds for the high cost infrastructure, the Lifeline program for low cost residents, rural provisions, and then a E-rate was for schools and libraries. Those are kind of the four buckets under the Universal Service Fund. Well, ACP is, you can think of it as a fifth bucket, right? I mean, it's a different sort. I mean, it's most like the Lifeline program, right? But it's not being funded by the USF mechanism right now. ACP was funded by general revenues. Where those general revenues come from? Well, the same place that the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act's funds came from, right? It was 1.7, I believe, may have that number wrong, $1.7 trillion in funds, 65 billion of which were for broadband, 42.5 billion of which went to BEAD, a couple billion here and there for other programs, and then around 13, 14 billion went to the Affordable Connectivity Program. And now that number has been dwindled from 10 billion to, in this past year ago, to 3.6 billion now. So, I mean, that's kind of the pace of spending when you're spending, $30 a month on broadband per month for low-cost households that meet that threshold. So, where's that money going to come from going forward? Well, a change, a reform, tend to not like that word, an alteration to the current Universal Service Fund. But that's kind of like the third rail of broadband politics, right? No one wants to change that, and particularly because the funds are not clearly being taken from the same place that they're going to. So that creates tensions, right? When it was all kind of the telephone company getting the money in one pocket, taking it from one pocket and putting it in another, that didn't create problems. But now you basically have lots of entities, including VoIP providers, that are basically being, taxed or feed by these funds, and it's going to other sources of money. Now, the idea here, insofar that I am familiar with it, is that there's kind of an idea for an extension of the Affordable Connectivity Program. The Biden administration put forward a $6 billion fund to replenish the ACP while there is discussions for a revamp of USF. That's kind of what's being discussed. So, I mean, as to your question, would it make sense to swing ACP over to the Universal Service Fund and sunset the Lifeline program? I think in a rationalized world, that's likely going to happen, but not going to happen anytime soon. I do see a comment or a question on the chat window. Again, encourage you to put these on the Q&A, but Joseph Longway asks that, or says that, rural utility service will fill in the gaps as it always has, but our industry will see the downturn in 2024, 2025 as this federal money leaves the equation. Okay, that's a great point, Joseph. We definitely are in a moment where there's funds pushing in, stimulus funds, if you will, on our industry, which, a year ago, we were talking a lot about inflation, the much higher than 7.7% cost of inflation in the broadband industry. And that's still quite high. People are adjusting to the reality that this is not going to get spent in 1 year or 2 years. It's going to be a 3, 4, 5-year program. So I just want to, maybe not quite 2024, 2025 downturn, but that's Joseph's point. So appreciate you raising that. Let's go to this story here. This is by Jericho Casper, reporter at Broadband Breakfast. Great story. Talks about the $3.6 billion in funds that are projected to be remaining from the $14.6 billion Affordable Connectivity Program. This is the money that's remaining, and 1 in 6 Americans are receiving ACP funds, right? So that's a higher than I expected number. The remaining funds will be depleted by May if enrollment continues at the current rate, and that is according to a ACP dashboard monitoring tool. We actually had Institute for Local Self-Reliance on our program just 2 weeks ago, along with many other people talking about the ACP at year's end. And the piece, Jericho's piece, highlights how large majority of voters support the continuation of the program, and yet there is very new criticism that's come up from Republican leaders. This was a story we just did. I'll pop over to that. December 18th, Republican lawmakers criticized ACP as wasteful in letter to FCC chairwoman. Okay, a little bit harsher than we thought, because most Republicans are supportive of this, but we're beginning to see some very conservative groups counter that and argue that this is not money well spent, right? And look, I mean, who can anyone say Washington's well run? I don't think anyone can. It's just impossible to see how this program gets instantly renewed without coming just to the wire or even beyond, right? And as I kind of maybe a little too lightheartedly said at our event 2 weeks ago, look, May, wait. If you're telling me this doesn't run out until May, we got months and months, right? I mean, whereas we're dealing with issues like the expiration of funds to support America's allies in Ukraine and other issues, other priorities that bubble the top. So I just, as important as this issue is to us in the broadband industry, it maybe hasn't cracked the larger issue area. Jericho's piece also does talk about how Administrator Alan Davidson was kind of on the hot seat. He did discuss how the BEAD program would suffer if ACP is not refunded or renewed, and that is a very good point. And Ryan Johnston of Next Century Cities also linked these issues. If ACP is allowed to end, the federal government could end up overspending on every broadband deployment. In other words, BEAD networks will be unable to link millions of Americans without ACP. Mike has added a new question here. Continuing reference to ACP, are there current subsidy programs for low-income subsidies for electricity and water utilities? If not, why is ACP so popular for broadband? Even if we agree that broadband has become an essential utility, why subsidize it so heavily if we're not doing the same for electricity and water? Okay, I can't speak to that. I don't know how electricity and water are not subsidized. I am aware of a fair number of subsidies for electricity usage. Maybe it's not quite as federalized as Lifeline is, but thanks for raising that point. Maybe just one or two more quick points on ACP. We had a really great discussion, Broadband Breakfast, together with Network On and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance spoke at this at an event. This was up at, if you go to special events and you go to the Connect 20 Summit. This was just a month and a half ago. It was about digital navigators, but the session spoke quite a bit about ACP. And in fact, this is freely available. Most of our events are, require someone to pay and register, but this one you can register for free. And if you do register, you're led to the web page for all of the speeches at the event. And we actually had Sarah Morris of the National Telecommunications Information Administration, Joey Wender of the Treasury Department's Capital Projects Fund, and Laura Levier of USDA's Reconnect. They all spoke about ACP and the real significant importance of ACP to broadband deployment. All right, so that's ACP. Let's go on to the fourth day of broadband. We have another comment. Actually, let's just pop this in. Thanks for your comments, everyone. And again, appreciate everyone being here, spending time with us on this Sixth Day of Broadband. Joseph Longway says, in my opinion, BEAD program has driven up prices for everything, material, labor, permitting. It should be rolled out by region and leave out California, New York, which suck most of the money out because of ridiculous costs. Okay, all right. Thanks for putting your opinion in, your 2 cents in, Joseph. Paul Naro says, maybe because broadband can support access to education and self-development. That's a great response, Paul, to the point Mike made earlier about subsidization for broadband. Thanks. Keep the discussion going. We enable chat so you guys can talk and interact with one another. Sometimes webcasts, webinars don't do that. We wanted to keep that. So far, we haven't had problems with trolls and such. But thanks for your comments. All right, let's go on to the 4th day of broadband here. Okay, so go to our 12 days of broadband. The 4th day of broadband is the 4.8 million challenges to broadband maps. Okay, and so this was a very significant year for refining the maps. It's very significant in some ways. BEAD, you could argue, was delayed 1.5 years because Congress insisted this time around that there be maps. Okay, I don't disagree with that priority. First version of the map was released in November 2022, but then there were challenge processes on the federal level, and states and I guess the point I'm getting at here is that states are in the driver's seat right now. Okay, the FCC has put forth a map, but it's going to the states to refine it, and some states, including Louisiana, Virginia, and Kansas, have already launched their challenge process, which involves people saying hey, there really isn't coverage in this area, and using the tools, using resources, data showing that broadband is not available. And the FCC has now released its 3rd version, its public facing map, that is very much part and parcel of the process. This is a good point that Maryland State Broadband Officer Rick Gordon made. I think he made it at our event at Digital Infrastructure Investment. Once addresses are claimed as served, we don't have the ability to go back and change that. So we have to be very careful. Okay, so in other words, we're basically talking about a program which is geared towards these unserved locations that do not provide broadband at 25 by 3, 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up, right? But I've been pointing out that, I'm almost more concerned about the underserved, right? Or at least those that are not getting 100 by 20. And many argue, including Jonathan Chambers of Connexion, he's argued that on Broadband Breakfast Live Online, he's argued it elsewhere at other forums, that even 100 by 20 is unreasonably low, given that the average or median broadband speeds are higher than that right now. Don't have it at my fingertips, but I do believe that the median broadband speeds are higher than 100 megabits per second down and 20 megabits per second up. So why are we shooting for a target that's out of date? That's the argument, and there's a lot of legitimacy to that argument. But I guess the point I'm getting at is that when we're going to direct these funds, they need to go to lots and lots of people who are unserved, and I think they are also going to end up needing to go to people who are underserved, and quite often those who are claimed to be underserved are really unserved, because the quality of broadband that claims to be 100 by 20 is generally not quite 100 by 20. Anyway, I digress a little bit. Now we're going to talk about the 5th day of broadband, and let's go ahead and go to our 12 days page. I'll go ahead and copy this and put it in the channel here. But it's also on the event page here. So the 4th day of broadband, sorry, we just did the 5th day of broadband. We now talked about the states that are implementing BEAD. So kind of flows from 4th day to the 5th day. But all 56 states and territories have released for comment their BEAD initial proposals, right? And what does that mean? Well, that's what we're waiting for NTIA approval of, right? That's part of this process here. Mapping was a central concern. We talked about that. We've laid out a little bit about the maps here. The plans are due to the NTIA. Okay, so I misstated earlier. I said NTIA was due. No, they're due to the NTIA today. Okay, and that means they basically were done last month, put out for public comment. So I gather it's mostly a paperwork process, but sometimes states have changed, right? Virginia changed its initial proposal between its draft and what it submitted to the NTIA earlier this month. So that's worth noting and worth paying attention to, right? And the article, again, by our reporter Jake Neenan, talks about how these two states, Louisiana and Virginia, very much in the lead. Louisiana's has been approved, Virginia has been submitted, but not yet approved. And then Jake's article also talks about, concern about the Build America, Buy America provisions, the waiver for many of those provisions, and also the letter of credit changes. So these are kind of the panoply of concerns that have been raised about BEAD, and we kind of summarize and walk through this process in this piece. Are there any questions, right? Any questions that anyone in our audience has? Feel free to put them in the chat window and we'll address them, come back to them. I feel like I've talked myself through BEAD so much. So I'm going to talk about one more story. This is our 6th day of broadband story, right? And this is the one we posted today on $166 billion of American semiconductor investment. Okay, so the CHIPS Act was passed in August of 2022. Okay, so obviously Infrastructure Act was, November 2021, and then Inflation Reduction Act, around this time, either just before, just after CHIPS Act, which put a lot of the funds in for green energy, and then the CHIPS Act, right? And so this piece kind of highlights how $166 billion of new semiconductor investments and manufacturing projects into the United States in that first year, as both President Biden and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo have been quick to note, American ingenuity invented the semiconductor, but today the U.S. produces 12% of the world's supply, none of which are the most advanced, almost none of which I probably should say. This is down from 40% as recently as 34 years ago, right? So we used to make 40% of the world's global supply, now less than a third of that, 12%. What nation does produce 50% of semiconductors and 90% of advanced semiconductors? Taiwan. Okay, so let that sink in, right? That's obviously why we've got a lot of tension between these two great powers, China and the United States, over kind of the geopolitical force of the world, semiconductors. So this piece talks a lot about the CHIPS Act, right? Obviously, it's spending money. That seems to be what Washington knows how to do, is spends $52 billion to incentivize chip companies to build factories in the U.S., aiming to reduce our country's reliance on Asia, Taiwan, for critical components in everyday electronics. During the one-year anniversary, Biden administration officials touted investment commitments by Micron, IBM, Wolfspeed, many, many others. And then this is just highlighting some of the provisions of the CHIPS Act supporting U.S. semiconductor manufacturing through $39 billion in semiconductor manufacturing incentives, receiving statements of interest, stood up a Chips for America team, and specific guidance on the investment tax credit for this sort of investment. Still some questions about labor shortages, right? And these were raised at our Made in America Summit in June. This event kind of brought together these three core pieces of legislation: Infrastructure Act, the green energy provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS Act. and how they are kind of working together to hopefully lead to, American Renaissance in manufacturing. Today's piece closes on this bit about CHIPS Act and the AI race, right? And I think it's important to remember that, as much as we are in a little bit more of a tense relationship with China than our country, the United States used to be more in a allied or at least collaborative relationship. It's important to remember that they are both an ally and a competitor, right? And so, as Sean Murma, the Digital Supply Chain Institute, said at the Made in America Summit, China is a large supplier of raw materials needed for manufacturing and a large consumer of microchips. Okay, so we cannot, forget or throw out globalization, right? As much as there's a lot of talk this year of de-risking, engagement with China, there's going to be ways, there should continue to be ways in which our nations interact and collaborate. I would hope, right? That's my hope for the new year. Mike Dunn has had another question here. He points out that he's a firm believer that BEAD and other federal broadband funding should drive service that will still be relevant at least 5 to 10 years from the award date. If this is truly generational investment, we should be building broadband networks to effectively serve the coming generation, not the previous one, right? So I think you're echoing my point about making sure that we use higher standards and speed thresholds. So the standard should be forward-looking, even if the funding is only supplying basic service today, 100 by 20. I agree, Mike. Thank you for making that point. I'm going to leave it open for another 2 minutes here, guys and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for spending this time with us, with me and each of you through chat in our 12 days of broadband, or I should say half of our 12 days of broadband. We've got 6 more stories for you in the next week, and I'm pleased to report that 5 of them are on new topics. Okay, so on this past time around, it was only 2 or 3 that were new topics, but the next 6 days, 5 of them are new topics, new to this year, and not covered last year. I just want to remind everyone that we'll be back in the new year on January 3rd. And look forward to seeing all of you at another Broadband Breakfast Live online. On behalf of each of you, I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season, wonderful new year, and we will see you in the new year. Take care. Bye-bye.